Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Dr. Delphina Joyce Avila, AZTESOL president, and AZTESOL stands for Arizona Teachers of English to Speakers of Other Languages. Welcome to AZTESOL Professional Development. Today, we are so fortunate that we have a wonderful individual that is going to be providing professional development. Today, you are in for a treat with Dr. Armando Garza Ayala, and he will be talking about biliteracy in the K-12, English as a medium of instruction, classrooms, content language, and translanguaging objectives. Dr. Garza, would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Uh, Welcome everyone. My name is Armando Garzayala, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of New Mexico in the College of Education, specifically in the Department of Language, Literacy, and Sociocultural Studies. And I teach in the programs of bilingual education and TESOL. I've been here in New Mexico for almost 6 years since the fall of 2020. And I will be explaining or uh, I don't know, saying more things during my presentations. So um, that's all for now.
That's all, folks. Thank you, Dr. Ayala. AZTSOL reflects the unique multicultural landscape of Arizona, where educators from diverse backgrounds come together to support students from countless linguistic and cultural communities. I'm so honored to be a part of AZTSOL. Our mission is to advance professional excellence in English language teaching through advocacy, professional development, research, and collaboration among educators, administrators, and community advocates serving linguistically diverse learners in Arizona. We're so grateful that we had one of our member at large do a whole professional development series on AI, and we have many additional professional developments upcoming. Our vision is a future where English language learners in Arizona have access to high quality, culturally responsive education that empowers them to achieve academic success and civic participation. Our core values are educational equity and access, cultural linguistic diversity, and professional growth and collaboration, all based on evidence-based practices. Who we serve are English language teachers, administrators, teacher candidates, and community partners. We have professional development. We have an annual conference as well as regional workshops and online opportunities such as this one. And we have membership benefits. Here are the membership benefits. I'm going to now hand it over to you, Dr. Ayala, to take over. Thumbs
Okay,
up if you can see the screen. Awesome. Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so you know the title of my presentation, and I'm gonna go directly to this is part of my introduction, I'm going to introduce myself. And I consider myself as a racial justice bilingual educator. That's part of my, academic uh, 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 academic training. I'm Mexican. I'm an immigrant. I consider myself also Latino. And I'm bilingual, biliterate, also a K-12 educator. So before going into a PhD education, I was a teacher, middle grades mathematics teacher. And so that's why I was teaching in a bilingual school or I will say multilingually or bilingually. And uh, that is why uh, one of my research and teaching interests is biliteracy. And being in New Mexico or um, part of my trajectory as a professional in education, I've been in different parts where multilingualism is the norm. So all of these components have shaped my research and teaching interest into a critical teacher, educator, and critical research. Um, also educator. So, and this is part of my professional trajectory as an assistant professor. So I've been in Texas, California, and then here in New Mexico. So I've been working with bilingual and TESOL educators for almost more, I don't know, more than a decade. So anyway, so this is important to share and for me to know and to reflect on because that is part of the work that I'm going to share with you today. So before going into the topic, so I'm going to share some labels that we are familiar with. We are very familiar with number one, two, three, four, and we might be familiar with number six. So uh, during the presentation, I might be using the acronym EBs or emerging bilinguals. And I included also the number five because when I was in California, or some school districts, or at least LA um, Unified, was using this standard English learner, which is not exactly a positive label. So if you want to know more about it, I invite you to Google it. I am not going to talk about it. So I always tell my students that, if you are not familiar with EBs, for example, I myself, it took a while to shift from EL or ELL to emergent bilinguals or emergent multilinguals. So uh, I will say it is normal to spend some time within the transition. So the rationale for this presentation, first, uh, we as K-12 teachers, content area K-12 teachers, we are forced to teach in English, even though we might be bilingual or multilingual. So we are in an English-only classroom, or even if we have bilingual and emerging bilingual students in our classrooms and we are aware of that, we are forced to teach in English. I was forced to teach in English. So, and when I was teaching mathematics, I'm going to share an anecdote. I was teaching the Pythagorean theorem in middle school. So, and because I always knew the linguistic profile of my students or my classrooms. So I was always trying to promote biliteracy, specifically mathematics, and trying to demystify the 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 I would say this common belief that mathematics is universal. Well, we know that that is not true. And I ask, how do you say leg of a right triangle in Spanish? Because most of my students were bilingual in Spanish and English. And, of, and one proficient bilingual student said, pierna, and of course, pierna is a one translation of leg, but it is not the mathematical term that we use for, the two sides that form the right triangle of um, this in mathematics. So we use another word. So that is one of the rationale of this particular topic, because our students in our U.S. system, um, bilingual and emerging bilinguals, they don't have the opportunity to develop biliteracy skills unless they are in a formal bilingual program, and sometimes they don't have that opportunity. So as a social justice, as a social and racial justice educator, I have this commitment to promote these biliteracy skills, even if I am just teaching in English. So the second rationale, there was one time that I was speaking with a TESOL director of a school, a high school actually, here in New Mexico. And even though this director was uh, a certified bilingual educator and also TESOL educator, so she had a monoglossic ideology. She referred to these bilingual students or these emerging bilingual students as ELL students. And she was talking about, well, we use translanguaging as the way they speak, you know? And I was like, well, not exactly, we don't, we professionals. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm very sarcastic sometimes. And we professionals do not use translanguaging as the way we speak. Translanguaging is a pedagogical approach, and we are going to see that in a moment. So that is the second rationale for this. So some of the content that we are going to cover, we are going to talk about subtractive and additive education, and a little bit about monoglossic and heteroglossic ideologies and dynamic education. And of course, we are going to talk about these objectives that I always share with my TESOL students, that um, they are getting the TESOL endorsement here in New Mexico, because they want to serve better the bilingual and emerging bilingual population that they have in their schools. And they want to teach mathematics or English language arts, but with a better approach, with a TESOL approach. So I'm going to focus on the English as a medium of instruction classroom, because that's basically what the majority of the TESOL endorsed teachers are. So you will see these throughout the presentation. So here in bilingualism or subtractive education, we know that in subtractive education, basically we eradicate one language, and it's definitely wrong. And we have these monocycle or unicycle, whatever you want to call it. And basically we have the language one, the native language, and we replace it into language two. So we are not creating bilingual individuals, and definitely we are not creating biliterate individuals. So, but in additive bilingualism, we know that we create bilingual individuals, right? And there is nothing wrong with it. On the contrary, I professionally, when I was in my master's program and even in my doctoral program, so I believed and I was instructed to believe that additive bilingualism was good. However, then I learned that it wasn't that good. So in this case, like for example, Flores and Rosa, uh, we respect the language of our students, the home language of our students. We value the language of our students, but we don't do anything about with that, because we are teaching in English. And 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 if we are English monolingual teachers, even though we have a TESOL endorsement or a TESOL diploma, well, we are teaching in English, and our concern is to teach in English. So, and I always ask my students, what do you prefer, subtractive or additive bilingual education, or just additive, or just education? Well, my students, of course, they say, no, we want to respect our students' first language, and value. Well, you are pro additive bilingual education or just additive education. Well, what if I tell you that maybe that is not exactly what I am, you know, uh, I don't know, something that it is not exactly 100% good. And I'm saying 100% because, well, it is much better than subtractive. So, and I share with my students this image to differentiate between monoglossic and heteroglossic language ideologies. And I don't want to go in deeper into these um, linguistic terminologies. So, uh, and I always ask them, how can you describe this image? We have this map, but what do you see or what you don't see? You know? And well, the first thing that they say, well, we cannot see, well, of course, we see continents and we see some countries. We can identify some countries. However, we cannot see borders. So that's basically, this heteroglossic approach or heteroglossic perspective when we don't see borders. And then when we transfer that to language education and having this heteroglossic perspective, well, we don't see borders between languages. And if we have a classroom where we have 3, 4 languages represented, well, there are no borders between those languages and the language of instruction that I am using, in this case, English. So, um, and then I go to this, um, in, and I want to ask you to pay attention to these 3 bullet points. And see the difference between subtractive education and additive education. So in subtractive education, we are teachers as language police. We are policing the language of our students, and we don't want the home language. We want to replace it. And Baker Bell calls this as the eradication language pedagogy. So we have a pedagogical approach for that. And then we have additive education. Basically, the bullet points didn't change in the sense that we are friendly. We respect your language, but out of my classroom. Why? Because I'm teaching in English. It is great that you speak Dine. It is great that you speak French. It is great that you speak Spanish, but I'm teaching in English. So Baker Bell calls it respectability language pedagogy. We respect the language, we value the language, but we don't do anything with it because we are teaching in English. And then we have what we call dynamic education, or what Ofelia Garcia calls dynamic education or dynamic bilingualism. In this case, the teacher is a language guide. And Baker Bell calls it, and this title is bolder, saying this is an anti-racist linguistic education and pedagogy in which language um, we use all languages of our students in our classroom because we not only respect the languages that our students bring into our classroom, we use them to teach mathematics, to teach social studies, to teach English language arts, or to teach English language development, as some states call it. So in this case, teachers are just support in the sense that they make connections. They try to make connections between the home language and the English language, the home language and whatever literacy from the home, and mathematics and social studies and science, etc., etc. So that's why I differentiate additive education, which, yes, it is okay, but it is not 100% good. So then I have to go beyond. And this beyond point is dynamic education. So um, having these ideas, so and I put it here, for example, this slide. Um, I shared before what heteroglossic perspective is, and why it is important to have this heteroglossic perspective in our classroom, in our English as a medium of instruction classroom. Well, here in this slide, you can see if you are having an additive approach, basically you are saying, still, I have a monoglossic approach. I have this English only approach. So in a heteroglossic approach, you have this dynamic approach. Um, so, and let me go ahead. However, my students bring up this conundrum because even well, I live in New Mexico. Many of my TESOL pursuing TESOL endorsed teachers, they are bilingual and they use their bilingualism to teach, but they are told that they cannot use a language other than English. So how we are supposed to promote biliteracy if we are told not to use whatever language that is not English? And so this is the examples that I'm going to show in a moment solve that conundrum. And I ask this question to my students always at the beginning of the class. Do you want to be a social justice agent? Do you want to promote language and academic justice to your students that for decades or centuries, this academic justice, this language justice has been denied to them, to their parents, to their grandparents? So usually, typically, I have an affirmative answer. So, okay. So then we have these questions. What can we do to promote biliteracy in the EMI classroom where bilingual and emerging bilingual students are present? Well, the first thing is to have content and language objectives. And then, for me, I got my doctoral degree in Texas, and having content and language objectives in Texas is like, it's you know how to do math, how to solve a typical addition, a two-digit addition. In California, it was common, but here in New Mexico, it was not, and it is not yet. So it is common to have content objectives, of course, or just objectives. But having language objectives was like, what is that? So anyway, so that is the first thing that I have to share with my students. Okay, the difference between content and language objectives. So, and I have this Venn diagram, which is very typical. The content objective tells you the what you're going to teach, what are your students are going to learn, you know? And then language objective tells you the how your students are going to learn or how they are going to demonstrate learning and how you as a teacher or we as teachers, uh, we are going to know that they are learning, right? So this is the first step, what and how. And then the content objectives tell us uh, they emphasize grade level content standards, of course, and that is a clue. Standards, content standards. And I always emphasize that. And then language emphasize content area, grammar, and vocabulary, like typical linguistic skills. And then content develop content area knowledge, like, the Pythagorean theorem, you know, that is content area knowledge, or similes in language arts, or something like that, or uh, something in social studies. And language develop content area linguistic skills, and also I am trying to simplify this. Well, language objectives sort of, support content objectives, you know, and content objectives come directly from your standard, the standard that you are going to teach. So if you don't have a standard, I'm sorry, you don't have a content objective. Sorry for you. Now, language objective is different because it may have several sources. So language objective may have like standards, like language standards, like you can use ELD standards, you can use ELA standards, you can use, if you are in a bilingual classroom, you can use WIDA standards. I don't know. So, well, you can use standards, or you can use the particular linguistic skills that will support the content standard that you will need, or because you are the teacher, you know your students. You should know your students. If you don't know the language skills of your students, something is wrong. Sorry for you, us. You know. So you need to know your students. We need to know your students, our students. So again, content objectives come from the standard, directly from the standard. Language objectives come from standards or the content objective or whatever you need to support the linguistic skills of your students because you know your students. Now, examples. So I chose science. Don't ask me why. Maybe I'm biased. I don't know. But I am one of those professors or teachers who believe that you can read and write in all subjects, even in mathematics. So But I chose science because uh, sometimes, and this is my experience, the teachers, the science teachers that I have had in my classes who are pursuing the TESOL endorsement here in New Mexico, they believe that they are not teaching language. They are teaching science. And I was like, God, I mean, yes, I know you're teaching science, but you have a lot of language, when you teach science. But anyway, and I chose a standard for middle school, like in the middle of K-12. So this is for sixth or seventh grade. So it says apply Newton's third law to design a solution to a problem involving the motion of two colliding objects. Now, this is not too long for a content objective, right? It's one sentence, about 12 to 15 words. So it is not too long. But I tell my students, my teachers, teacher candidates, and in-service teachers, uh, you know, try to simplify the content and language objectives. Try to be, even for English monolinguals, English proficient students or bilingual proficient. Um, so because, I used to be a science and math teacher. So, and in my experience, if you start with Newton's third law, the students are going to be like, oh my God, this is too difficult, or they block themselves or something like that. So I'm going to create the content objective based on that stuff. That can be a little subjective, okay? And it says students will create a solution to a problem involving motion and objects. Now, do you agree with that content objective? Is it related to the standard? You don't have, as a teacher, you know that we don't have to cover the entire standard in one lesson or unit. So I decided that my students will create a solution to a problem, but maybe this is just I'm going this conversation is just about objectives, so I'm not going to go into the entire lesson plan. So don't expect me to tell you the procedure. But as a teacher, in my mind, I can write the entire procedure, potential procedure, right? I can have my students to, come up with some questions like, okay, what kind of problem first? And then they have the problem. Okay, then they have to create the solution, you know? Well, okay, but I'm not going to go into details. So the first one, and I ask my students, is it related to the standard? And they say yes, but I'm the teacher. You are another teacher, and you are manipulating that standard, and you can write a slightly different content objective. And I'm saying slightly different because we are using the same standard. Okay. You may say students will be able to solve a problem and you have to provide the problem, maybe. I don't know. So, and then possible language objectives. I also tell my students, with one content objective is enough. One, two objectives, maybe two objectives if they are super related, that is fine. But one content objective is enough. However, language objectives is different. You may have several. Why? Well, because remember, they come from standards, they come from the content objective, or from you as a teacher, as a language teacher, and also as a science teacher in this case. So the first one could be students will be able to read a procedure with specific steps related to the problem that they have to solve. And then the second one, understand and correctly use the words first, then, final, etc. Now, here I'm being very strict and say correctly use. Why? Because not only I am a science teacher, but I'm also a language teacher and I'm promoting language skills. So, and then I say discuss. Discuss with their peers the steps to solve the problem. So, and also I ask my students, try to see these objectives in terms of linguistic skills, reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So we have reading, we have writing here, we have discussing or talking. And then students will be able to write their procedures and conclusions in a display poster. So now, these objectives, again, they can be subjective. You as a teacher may have different objectives. I have 4, but you can have 3 or 7 because you have a different classroom. You know, I don't know, you know, I don't know. Okay. So, and I forgot to let you know that if you have a question or something, please feel, feel free to let me know, interrupt me or something. I have also the chat, and I can read the chat if you have a question in the chat. Okay, so let's move on. What is next? Now that we have talked about content and language objective, we have the same question. We have content objectives, we have language objectives, but we have to divide language objectives into 2, specific and general. So it is here where translanguaging comes into our lesson. Why? Because Garcia, Barra Johnson, and Seltzer uh, introduced these specific general and specific performances, linguistic performances of our bilingual and emergent bilingual students. So we have to use them. As teachers, we have to use the linguistic resources. So what is exactly translanguaging? So, and I have those screenshots, you know, and I'm going to use the better one, the one in the middle. So I don't want to be very technical. So translanguaging is the use of 2 or more dialects. I'm sorry, or 2 or more named languages or dialects. And by dialects, I mean, variations of a language, any variation of a language. So, and that is a basic definition of translanguaging. So, and it is important to know uh, that the translanguaging is an approach to bilingualism. As TESOL teachers, I mean, it is very difficult nowadays to not have bilingual or emergent bilinguals in our classrooms. It is kind of rare if we don't have those students in our classrooms. So translanguaging is an approach to bilingualism that is not centered on languages. So that is important to know. So remember the map that I showed you at the beginning. So there are no borders. So we are not centering our approach on whether this is English, this is Spanish, this is French, this is Diné, this is whatever language. So, and um, also, we need to know that when we use translanguaging in our classes, we are using the full linguistic resources that our students bring with them. So, okay. And going back to these general and specific linguistic performance, what is exactly general and specific performance? So we know that bilingual and emergent bilingual students, they perform differently. And in order for them to show what they can do, they kind of draw from these linguistic resources, this linguistic entire repertoire that they have to perform in their classroom, to perform scientifically, to perform mathematically, to perform in social studies, to perform in English language arts. So, general linguistic performance refers to the full features of the linguistic repertoire. In other words, they use all languages that they have. If they are bilingual in Spanish and English, so they use both languages. So, and I call this the first one, the general language objectives. And then specific linguistic performance is the target language. So in our case, because we are teaching an English as a medium of instruction classroom, so we are teaching in English. So the specific linguistic performance or the specific language objective has to be in English. So students have to be using English only or as much as possible. So how they look like in this diagram. So we have the content objective. And then the first one, read a procedure with specific steps. And then I have discussed with their peers the steps to solve the problem using both languages. That is a general linguistic objective or general language objective. I am allowing the students or my students, because I may have only two languages represented in my classroom. But in this one, understand and correctly use the words first, then final. That is a specific language objective. And I don't have to write it down that is specific because, first, then, and final are in English. So, and the first one, students will be able to read a procedure with specific steps. Well, and I'm not saying that it is specific or general. Well, it is up to me because I'm the teacher and I know my students. And maybe the procedure is in English or is in another language. I don't know. I'm the teacher. So, and then I have this one. Students will explain their solution to a peer, just to one student, using, and I have it in brackets, using their linguistic repertoire as desired. Because maybe there I have three or more languages represented in my classroom, but maybe I have several students who speak the same language. So then I have students will be able to write their procedures and conclusions in a display poster. Because I'm teaching science in English, their final product has to be, and this is important, it has to be in English. Now, this is a typical question that all my in-service teachers ask me. But what if my emerging bilinguals are in a, they just started learning English and you want them to write only in English? Well, you are the teacher. You have to help them. Maybe the first draft is including a lot of words in another language and English. And the second draft is including some of the words that were in another language, you know, they changed. And the third draft, maybe it is using another more English than the native language. So what the authors are saying here, the specific language objectives, um, they don't have to be in English only 100%, but the students have to be using as much as possible. So we have to scaffold our students. Yes, I have a question. I have a hand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ayala. We have a question, and I imagine that in your expertise, you've seen this a lot. And one of our participants is asking, is it possible to use too much L1 in a bilingual classroom, and how much is enough? And I know you scaffolded when you had your conversation on the levels, but could you please, in your expertise, share some information on this one? And thank you for
So
answering your question.
yeah, this is kind of related to what I was saying. And this, for example, look at the bullet points and see it I will say as a procedure, like a transition from using the entire linguistic repertoire of our students, and then the final step or the final product has to be in English. Now, how much is enough? If I have to quantify, I will say I cannot quantify it. However, the final goal, and I tell my students, my in-service teachers, you know, something that you are going to show your principal or your coordinators or whoever, you know, is that your students know how to write in English a procedure and conclusions in English. And those procedures and conclusions, in this case, they are scientific procedures. So, um, uh, in a translanguaging classroom, well, I will say it says the question is it says a bilingual classroom. I'm not sure if it is a formal bilingual classroom, like a dual language classroom, or a classroom that contains bilingual and emerging bilingual students, but it is an English only classroom. You know what I mean? So, how much language one can I use? If you ask me, you are the teacher. It is up to you because I'm teaching Newton's third law to design a solution. If they know the solution in both languages, because I'm creating the social justice in my classroom, and again, I don't have it, I don't, I'm not losing my goal to have the procedure in English, which is the last objective, the specific language objective. So that is important in an English as a medium of instruction classroom. I hope I'm answering the question. So, um, and then now that I have the general language objectives and the specific language objectives. Just imagine in New Mexico is like a revolution because, in my experience, because sometimes teachers do not know what a language objective is, and then I'm going into general and specific language objectives, and they are like, oh my God. But I didn't change that much. and it is up to me as a teacher. Now, um, I'm going into a third one because you told me, and I will say this, you told me, you want to be a social justice agent, so and you told me. So, in order to be a social justice agent, you have to promote biliteracy because you have to promote these social language and academic justice for these bilingual students. So you have to promote biliteracy in your content area classroom, whatever content area that you are teaching. Now, I call it biliteracy objective. Ofelia Garcia calls it translanguaging objective. Why I prefer biliteracy objective? Because many school principals or administrators do not know what translanguaging is. And I always tell my students, do not waste your time trying to explain what translanguaging is. So biliteracy is more common in education. So they might know what biliteracy is. So I call it biliteracy objective. So I have this, the content objective and my potential language objectives, and I have here in red my target objective, language objective, which is specific. And I'm going to write my potential biliteracy objectives. I'm going to show four, but with one is enough, more than enough, I will say. Um, but I'm going to show four. One is students will be able to interview a community member in relation to the problem they explore. Now, why am I saying that this is a biliteracy objective? Because when they go into the community, at least here in New Mexico, I mean, there are too many languages represented here in Albuquerque, for example. And many members of the community do not speak English or prefer to speak their home language, and bilingual students, they are going to translate on the spot, which is not an easy task, everything that they learned in my classroom about Newton's third law of motion. So, and this is a biliteracy objective. And then another objective could be students will be able to present in groups or to the class their findings using their languages. And then another one, students will be able to design a model of their solution and present their findings multilingually. And then another one, which I love, and my students love it particularly, create a poster with written explanations in 2 or more languages. And they love it because I always tell them, you can use this as a showcase because you will showcase their bilingualism and their biliteracy skills because they are showing what they know about Newton's third law of motion to the entire school because you are going to put it in the hall or somewhere, and or you can invite parents, or you can invite the principal or the coordinator or the ESL coordinator, and if the ESL coordinator doesn't speak Arabic, I don't care, because it is about their biliteracy. It is about our students. And now the biliteracy objectives always see them as something else, social justice, academic justice. It is not mandatory. And I have to say it is not mandatory. It is up to you as a teacher because you told me that you want to be a social justice agent. So see it as I'm going to promote biliteracy in my classroom because my students are no longer ELLs. They are biliterate individuals. So, um, and, and here I want to conclude with this. Basically, the summary, we talk about this. Um, this presentation is going to be published. I'm writing on minor reviews for a manuscript for teachers, for practitioners, and it is going to be published in the TESOL journal. And it is going to have this title. Sorry for this typo. So it is a short article because I was thinking on teachers. So and it is not exactly a research article. So another thing that I wanted to share with you. So these are some resources that I use in my classes. Not all in one class, but I use this book in TESOL and bilingual classrooms. This is from 2017, but we have one edition from if it is not 2025, it is from last year. So this book, if you want to know more about Translanguaging, is really good, from 2014. And this website, the CUNY NICEB website, I mean, you can Google it. This is really good. It has a lot of lesson plans, K-12 lesson plans using Translanguaging. Um, okay, so we have some time for comments or questions. Yes, it might be a lot to share with students. Actually, I have a specific class, and we build, throughout the semester with teacher candidates. The class is called ESL across content areas. And so, uh, um, so I have the whole semester to, build on Translanguaging and so on, for example. And tomorrow we are going to finish with this Translanguaging objectives. So yes, it is a lot. In-service teachers, in my experience, because they have more experience, um, they write these objectives a little bit faster. So anyway, but yeah, I do agree. Let me stop sharing. Delfina, you are muted.
You're mute, Dr. Delfina.
I was thinking, can you read my lips? Because we're talking about language, right? So I just want to thank you all so very much. And I was asking if we could all give a round of applause to Dr. Armando Garza Ayala for sharing his expertise with us and for being a part of the TESOL community. We're so honored and grateful that he's given his time, his expertise, and he's come to share with you all through this opportunity. So thank you very much, Dr. Ayala.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank all of you who's given your precious time, because as Dr. Ayala shared, being an educator, there's so much information to learn, and what's a content and what's biliteracy. There's so much academic vocabulary for
Yeah.
education. And you've chosen to spend time with us. So thank you very much. Once again, thank you, Dr. Ayala. I'm Dr. Delphina Joyce of AZTESOL, and please get involved with AZTESOL. We have volunteer opportunities. We're excited about our next upcoming professional development. And we are just welcoming leadership. We would like to continue to grow, reach out. And are there any other questions or anything else that anyone else would like to share before we close? Thank you. I appreciate you, and thank you for sharing. Excellent presentation. Thank you for making this widely available. You all have a beautifully blessed evening, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you again. And all the best in New Mexico and for our Arizona friends or other friends who are international too. You all take care and be well.
Thank you.